famous on my YouTube side. So this is my presentation for the book I read for the third time, The Way of Kings, but also it's as an introduction to the greater Cosmere. So what is the Cosmere?
No, what?
It is a planetary system of different planets, obviously, because it's a planetary system. And there's stories on every single planet. So Way of Kings takes place in Roshar, which is over here. And this chart here is a little bit outdated, but the pinkish fuchsia color is the first book in a series. Stuff that's green and orange hasn't been published yet, but we know is going to exist, and also there's a lot more shit now. So, moral of the story, Roshar is part of the Stormlight, or is where the Stormlight Archive and Way of Kings is at. So it's all of these books, and then there's like a lot of other books. Potentially there's going to be up to 50 books in the Cosmere. Currently about 20-ish I think are currently published or are in process of being published in the next year.
They really aren't even halfway
How
yet.
long?
No.
No.
I mean, he publishes so quickly.
He publishes at least like 2 books a year. This year he's publishing like 5.
2 books
When
in
did
the
the- when did
Cosmere.
the
He
book-
publishes like 5 a year.
When?
No.
When did the book
There's
start
no
being
way someone
published?
publishes
When was the
that
first
much
book
without
He's
published?
losing.
just insane.
Zach, do you know when the first book was published? She's asking that question.
His first book?
Elantris was the
Elantris
first
was
book,
first one.
which is over here.
He
on the
wrote
South
it
Planet.
in college.
What the?
I think he probably published it about 15 years ago.
Okay. I thought this was like a book from the
No.
80s or something.
He's like in his
Dude, he's pumping these
Or late
books out.
40s.
Yeah, I think he's like 45 or something like that. He's chugging.
He's doing fine.
His biggest fear is dying before the Stormlight Archive specifically is done because that's his magnum opus. But
Yeah, imagine waking up every day and be like, if I don't get this shit out.
That's why he published so fast.
He did have to finish the Wheel of Time for Robert Jordan, so that's why
Yeah,
he
it
has
was-
this fear.
He had to break it up into 3 books instead of 1.
Anyways, I'm talking about the Way of Kings. That's on the planet of Roshar, which is in this zone of the sword guy, which makes sense because they're a sword fighting planet. There's a few recommended ways to read the
Swords are
Cosmere.
important.
This is a lot of words, but moral of the story, if you want to read this, if you're inspired to read these books after you're done, ask Zach and I some questions on how to read them, because at a certain point, you will be missing a lot because they are all connected. Essentially, you can do a lot, but by the time you read Stormlight 5 or Mistborn 4, you kind of have...
Era 2, book 4.
Yeah, Mistborn Era 2 before, so book 7 in the Mistborn series, technically. You kind of you need to have read everything else. But I recommend if you're an experienced adult high fantasy reader, starting with Stormlight Archive, because it is the best thing he's written. It is high quality content, and I would not have, I think, fallen as deeply into it if I started with Mistborn, because I didn't really like it as much. It reads a lot more like young adult fantasy, which is totally fine. It is very adult in the concepts that they cover, but it is an easier read. And I think if like you are experienced with adult high fantasy, starting with Stormlight's fine, because it will make you appreciate everything else a lot more. And that's kind of was my experience. But basically you need to read Mistborn Era 1, Mistborn Secret History, before reading Stormlight 4, and you need to read everything that exists currently before you read Mistborn Era 2 Book 4 or Mistborn 7.
Swear to God, if you calling her before you calling me.
Yes, Carlos.
What is this apostrophe here? Not apostrophe, asterisk. What does the asterisk mean?
This does not include novellas or standalones.
So are you telling me
simplicity.
there are stories outside of the main stories as well? For
Yes.
this
Yes.
Cosmere?
There's also like a comic book series.
Which is great.
Um,
It's a graphic.
It's a graphic
It is a graphic
Who
novel.
is this man?
And Karen, what was your question?
Large
My
portions of
question was
this
Carlos's
are able to be
question.
read on their own too.
You're one of those bitches, huh? For simplicity, this is just covering the main books, except for I do call out the.
Warbaker.
Oh
White
yeah.
Sands? You have White Sands on there.
Yeah, so this is all of the White Sands is like an actual story.
Have you also read all these?
Most of them.
He hasn't read them as much as I have.
Y'all
so.
are animals.
I've read a lot of them
Holy.
twice.
Unfortunately, once you start, you're like, holy shit, this is the best thing I've ever read, and then you fall into a pit of despair or happiness. So now on to the actual topic of this presentation, The Way of Kings. Each book in this chonky book series,
And is every book that big?
in the Stormlight Archive, this is the smallest one. They increase by 50 to 100 pages each book. So this one is 1,004 pages. I promise it does not feel like that. It's fine.
I think
I feel like it feels like that.
the next book is like 1,094.
No, so they increase from between 50 and 100.
Because I'm reading it right now.
He is actively rereading these books.
Oh,
So each book in the Stormlight Archive follows multiple personalities, but you get the backstory of one character specifically. So book 1, Way of Kings, we learn about Caledon Stormblessed, which is also the love of my life. Anyways, we also get to meet some heralds, which will make more sense once you've read the book. Zeth, Shallan, Yasna, which is the brother of the king Elokar, which these are the nieces and nephews of Dalinar, and these are Dalinar's kids, Renarin and Adolin. It matters because there's family drama. And also the king's wit is in quotes for reasons that I will not tell you at this moment. Now, if you have your Bible, or the Way of Kings, I'm going to do a brief reading from chapter 46, page 646, just so y'all experience the literature of this book. Kaladin dreamed he was the storm. He raced forward, the storm wall behind him, his trailing cape, soaring above a heavy black expanse. The ocean, his passing, churned up a tempest, slamming waves into one another, lifting white caps to be caught in the wind. He approached the dark continent and soared upward. Higher, higher, he left the sea behind. The vastness of the continent spread out before him, seeming endless, an ocean of rock. So large, he thought, odd. He hadn't understood. How could he have? I technically plan to read like a page and a half, but it's really long, so if y'all get annoyed by me, just like yell at me and I'll stop reading, but otherwise I'm going to read the page and a half.
Can you go slightly slower, like this much?
Okay. He roared past the shattered plains. They looked as if something very large had hit them at the center, sending rippling breaks outward. They too were larger than he had expected. No wonder nobody had been able to find their way through the chasms. There was a large plateau at the center, but with darkness and the distance, he could not see much. There were lights, though. Someone lived there. He did see that the eastern side of the plains was very different from the western side, marked by tall, spindly pillars, plateaus that had nearly been worn away. Despite that, he could see a symmetry to the shattered plains. From high above, the plains resembled a work of art. In a moment, he was past them, continuing north and west to soar across the Sea of Spears, the shallow inland sea, where broken figures of rock jutted above the water. He passed over pronunciations are not working on my favorite, Alethkar, catching a glimpse of the great city of Kholinar, built amidst foundations of rock like fins risen from the stone. He then turned southward. Away from anything he knew, he crested majestic mountains, densely populated at their tips, with villages clustered near vents that emitted lavas of steam, yada yada yada. There was a point to this. I forgot how much river it was, and
You just got caught up talking about your boyfriend. It's all good.
I'm a little drunk, to be honest. I was out of happy hour since 4 o'clock. That's enough content to give you a glimpse of the book. I also would like to read you a little bit of like the very first line of the book, just because I mentioned Zeth, so I figured y'all should get a glimpse of who he was. It's just like 2 sentences. Zeth, son Felino, truthless of Shinovar, were white on the day he was to kill a king. That's how the book starts. So that's where we're at. Anyways, the plot as per Tumblr, and I am going to directly read this because I think it's fucking hilarious. In a world where everything is a crap, if you're mentally ill and seriously stressed, you get magic powers by becoming best friends with your own baby emotional support fairy. You get magic and therapy, and they get to figure out how to be a human. The main characters are a clinically depressed grunge boy with PTSD who also happens to be a slave, an abused girl, some sort of dissociative panic disorder, who just wants a weird anime-like creature. I googled what a senpai was, and that's what it is. To notice her.
What? Never mind.
If I'm wrong, Carlos, feel free to correct me. I'm not an anime person.
It's your presentation.
That works for this plot. A middle-aged recovering alcoholic who is seeing apocalyptic visions of the past, but only when it rains. And the Vision Man's son, the world's best himbo, and only mentally stable one in the whole dang book. Also, there's a war happening, an impending mystery apocalypse. Also, racism, heavy moral questions, about the nature of violence, leadership, justice, and slavery, as well as a professional serial killer with religious issues. But then again, there's also a pacifist Polynesian Russian giant who likes to cook stew and give his friends haircuts, so it balances out. Also, magic, animate giant swords, and a guy whose job it is to insult everybody and almost make you read the word ass out loud in front of a toddler. Also, in the very fine print at the bottom, Men aren't allowed to read in this book, and also most women can't show one of their hands. It's very weird. That's Bridge 4.
You mean I already can't read?
Oh gosh, this is really long, Casey.
It's only 10 slides.
Her presentation was pretty long.
But she had fun and interact. Never mind.
I like it. I'm having a great time.
You
Yeah,
read
I'm
some
down-
of his books.
I'm
so-
down for this.
So my plot, because I thought the Tumblr thing was very funny.
I thought
because
that was great. That was great.
I
love
also
the Tumblr post.
don't know if I quite understand the crab thing, despite having read all of these books a bunch. But we're gonna move past that.
I mean, most things are crabs.
I don't get it. Don't hate me. This is a story about the magic returning to the planet. It's a planet that's ridden with war in this area, but it kind of expands to being all over the place. And it's a war that's lasted so long that the people involved don't like have the same goals they did when it started. We follow a mostly young but fully adult man, like he's in his like early 20s, I think, who was training to be a surgeon, but through an unfortunate series of events, is a slave when we meet him, and that's Kaladin. Love of my life again, I'll mention that. Kaladin is one of these people that the magic may or may not be returning to. Kaladin and his fellow slaves are fighting to figure out a way to survive in their roles. In one of the most uniquely brutal slave systems I've ever seen about in both real life or heard about in fiction, during a hella war period, so that's always interesting. They're literally just like live bait for people, and they have to like carry heavy shit around. It's more dramatic in the book. And we also meet some other people that are importante, and there's some interesting politicking, awesome world building, and a dope fleshed out. As the characters learn about it, you also learn about it as a reader. Magic system. That's Yasna and Shallan killing some guys who were trying to like rape them, so that's good. Hope everybody wants to read these books and is not overwhelmed by the amount of information I just gave you and how large the books are. It's a great time. 10 out of 10 recommend. That is my presentation. Don't be scared.
Yay!
I am scared.
That's
I'm
okay.
terrified.
I'm interested.